Hi, my name's Jenny Spear, and today I'm going to be talking to you about an instructional strategy called learning centers. Now, learning centers, most of the time when you think about centers in particular, you think of elementary school or even kindergarten classes where kids move from center to center. So they have the house center, they have the phonics center, they have the computer center. But centers can work really well in the upper grade levels as well. I teach middle school ELA, specifically 6th and 7th grade English language arts in Fort Worth ISD. And I found that learning centers are really useful, particularly when you're talking about writing. And that's generally when I use learning centers the most. So I wanted to talk to you about what that looks like in kind of a general sense, and then I wanted to give you an example of how I've used it in my specific classroom. So when I begin my day, when I'm going to be doing learning centers, I set my classroom up to be conducive to that. So I generally set it up into 3 different stations or centers. So, and I try and keep the numbers pretty even between the centers and make sure that one of them has an even number because one of those centers, the students work in pairs. So I arrange the number of desks in the centers I want. And as the students are coming in, I generally have them draw a popsicle stick that puts them in center 1, center 2, or center 3. And we go from there. One non-negotiable at my school is that we begin every class period with a bell ringer. So on the days when we're doing our learning centers, we begin our bell ringer. Generally, I have the students list 5 rules for learning centers. So this gets them in the mindset, it gets them ready to be participating in the learning centers. It also kind of jogs their memories of, oh, what am I supposed to be doing when we do learning centers? And I find this is a great way to set the tone. After the bell ringer, I do go over the rules. I try to be very explicit so that students understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing and when. I then announce what the centers are going to be. I always have a mini lesson at one of the centers that I'm teaching. I have the students work in pairs, and finally I have the students doing independent individual work. I like to rotate my centers every 10 minutes with a 60-second passing period between the centers. And like I mentioned previously, I keep a really close eye on the time, and I make sure that we really stay on schedule, and I keep a timer in order to help us do that. That's mostly because our class periods are only 45 minutes long, so for each student to be able to get to each center, we really need to use our time wisely. The last 5 minutes of the class period, I have the students do an exit ticket. And generally that exit ticket has them answer what they liked best about the learning centers, what they learned during the learning centers, and what they still need help with. I really like using exit tickets when we do learning centers because it helps me to know what worked well and what I need to improve for the students. It also lets me know what I need to do for remediation, so what the students aren't learning or don't understand. So, how does this particular strategy, learning centers, look in my classroom? So the mini lesson, when I do the one mini lesson that I've done that I found particularly useful when we're doing personal narratives or fiction or nonfiction writing. Personal narratives are the first writing that the students do in my classroom. So when we're doing personal narratives, I found it particularly useful to teach the students about hooks and how to use a hook. And hooks are what helps the helps the writer capture the reader's attention. So I generally lead the mini lesson, and I give the students a graphic organizer, and this kind of walks them through what hooks are. And I use an anchor chart to help the students to remember what hooks are, and I give them examples, and we talk through everything about what hooks are. And then as the mini lesson is winding down, about 7 minutes, I have each student choose a prompt and write their own hook. While the students are writing, I generally move between the other two centers and make sure that the students there are on task, or if there are any questions, that I can answer those questions. Though because it's set up in one classroom, it's pretty easy to move between the 3 groups and to figure out who needs help with what. Once the 10 minutes has passed and we're through the lesson on hooks, the students then rotate to the next center. And so the next center that I would do when they're working in pairs is peer editing. And this is a student-led group generally. Well, the students lead themselves, and the expectations are laid out by me, but they're generally posted also on an anchor chart. And a lot of times if I hear that students are off task, I will point to the anchor chart as a reminder of what they should be doing. Generally, when the students are doing peer editing, they're reading their peers' papers, and then they don't write on their peers' papers. Instead, they have a form kind of letter worksheet that allows them to give feedback. Generally, the worksheet says, "Today I read a personal narrative by," and they write the name of the author there. "The event that happened to him or her was," and they write about what they read. And they write one thing that I really liked, and then one suggestion that they could give. And finally, I would have really enjoyed more detail about, and then at the bottom of the page, they sign their name. When the students are done with this peer editing worksheet, they give it to the person that they peer edited. That person puts it in their writing folder so that they can refer back to it when they're doing their final draft. Finally, the last station, or the independent center, like I mentioned, is for independent work. And the way that I like to work this is, after I read the personal narratives, I gave the student 5 suggestions for vocabulary words that they could incorporate into their particular story. And their job at the vocabulary center was to look up those 5 words, the definitions for those 5 words, and figure out where in their story they could incorporate them. And that was to be done independently, and those words that I gave them, I tried to make individualized and tailored to their specific essay. As I mentioned before, then we would end with in the last 5 minutes, we would end and we would do an exit ticket. And the students would talk about what they liked best. And I found the majority of the students really liked the peer editing. They liked being able to read other people's writing and to also share their own writing with other people and hear their ideas. And then I asked them what they learned. And a lot of them didn't know anything about hooks and were thankful to learn about that, or maybe thankful is the wrong word, but were interested to learn about that. And then finally, where they still needed help. Now, I find that a lot of my kids need help with vocabulary, and I try to make myself available for that as well. And that's one reason why I give them tailored words that I feel like they could specifically benefit from, but I can also differentiate based on the student and their level of learning by giving them words that I know that they would be able to benefit from. So I really like using Learning centers in upper grades, I think that they're really useful and they can help students to really focus and hone in on their work, and it gives them useful strategies to make their writing better. I hope you found that this video was informational, and I hope you found a new strategy that you can use within your own classroom. Thank you. Have a good night.